Hey everyone, welcome to the 10th series of the ideal event from the logic of sense. In this chapter, Deleuze uses his notion of an ideal game as a model for a way to talk about thought, chance, pure events, and most importantly, it's a way into talking about his two readings of time, which he says the Stoics knew about. He said that the past, present, and future have two mutually exclusive ways of viewing time. The first one he called Chronos, which is the time of the present. In Chronos, it's a series of interlocking presents. The present does include the past, a contracted past, and an expanded future. And if you keep extending the present into the future and into the past as part of the present, you'll get what he calls a cosmic present, where everything is just here now. Chronos is where bodies and their mixtures in depth occur in states of affairs. And the other viewing of time he calls the Aion, which is where time, when the present happens, there is no present in the Aion. It immediately gets subdivided into the future and into the past. And this is where pure events are. And whereas the realm of Chronos is where causes are, in the Aion and events, these are the effects of those causes. So Chronos, the interlocking presence, depends upon matter. It's definitive. It's either active or passive, and this kind of time is cyclical. The Aion, the elongated pasts and future, is a straight line between the surface at the border of things and propositions. And rather than definitive, they are infinitive and neutral. It's incorporeal. The Aion is incorporeal, independent of matter. And he also says that the pure event actualizes in Chronos into a state of affairs. But otherwise, it always keeps going over the present, because a present moment, just a single moment, isn't the event in its whole event in itself. It's part of the event. So the pure event keeps going forward into time and backwards into the time. And he'll say that in this sense, pure events are signs. Okay, so the ideal game, he distinguishes between normal games that we're familiar with. And he starts off by saying that Lewis Carroll often invents new games or transforms the rules of existing games. He gives the example of the caucus race from Alice in Wonderland, where you can start wherever you want in the race and end wherever you want. And the croquet that the Queen of Hearts is playing toward the end of Alice in Wonderland, where the characters are moving around and it's a little chaotic. And he says that the characteristics of this kind of game is that there's a lot of movement and there are no rules. So he then goes into talking about games we are already familiar with, and he writes up a brief theory of these games, which is that they have rules. They have categorical rules. For instance, the game of chess, every piece on that has only a certain way it can move and no other. It's a game dependent entirely upon skill. Ordinary games, Deleuze say these will also model something that's not a game. For instance, chess can be thought of as a model for war strategy. Also, the game of Risk is another model for war, for taking over the world. The game of Monopoly can be thought of as a model, perhaps, for capitalism, or the skill of acquiring money. Another big difference between ideal games and normal games is that ideal games affirm chance. They cause chance to occur more often, whereas regular games that we're familiar with, they'll sometimes use chance elements like the roll of a dice, but it's only to apportion chance, or to divide chance, to dominate chance, whereas the ideal game, having no rules, it affirms chance, it allows chance to happen more often. So two examples I can give in that regard come from music. One is the composer John Cage used to use chance elements in his composition. Sometimes it would call for the roll of a I Ching hexagram to determine how the composition would go. And that's the characteristic of this ideal game, is that every move, every play, the rules change. So that's how chance comes into it. And another example from music is the music producer, musician Brian Eno. He used to have a set of cards he would use in the recording studio called oblique strategies. And when he felt things weren't progressing, or there needed to be a change of some kind, he would draw one of these cards and follow the instruction written on it. One of the most famous of these cards, famous of these sayings, says, honor thy mistake as a hidden intention. Okay, and that's another aspect of the ideal game, is that something that one might consider a mistake or an error can actually be a way of introducing chance into the procedure, so it can be part of this ideal game. The ideal game is a game of problems and questions. Probably the most important points about the ideal game is that there are no rules, that it affirms chance, and no winners or losers. So in Deleuze will say that you're always victorious at the ideal game if you're affirming chance, if you're allowing chance to happen. And it'll get a little bit abstract. He compares it to thought, because he'll say, like, the roll of a dice or a thought creates a series that is smaller than the minimum of continuous thinkable time. So the smallest possible time beyond what we can even think of. He says there's a series there. He says it's about thoughts and about events. A single event will be that small, but these thoughts and events also connect with what he calls the long thought, or the big event, which kind of has to do with his concept of univocity. And he says that's beyond the maximum continuous thinkable time, the maximum continuous thinkable amount of time. So it goes from the minimum to the maximum. What he'll say regarding thought and the ideal game is that the ideal game is the reality of thought itself and the unconscious of pure thought. So the ideal game is sort of like the game of ideas, which he connects with events. Regarding thought connecting with this, what he calls the long thought, I'll just read a passage. It's frankly something that I am grappling with to understand. It sort of has a mystical cosmic aspect to it. But he says that all of these thoughts communicate in one long thought, causing all the forms or figures of the nomadic distribution to correspond to its own displacement, everywhere insinuating chance and ramifying each thought, linking the once and for all to each time for the sake of all time. For only thought finds it possible to affirm all chance and to make chance into an object of affirmation. And you'll say the same thing about events, that like the events, there are events that are smaller than the continuous thinkable amount of time, the amount of time we can continuously think about, but that these events can connect with one big event with a capital E, that's beyond our maximum continuously thinkable amount of time. And this all has to do with the aion and why it is thought of as infinitives in that aspect of time. So to back himself up, he'll first refer to a short story by Jorge Borges called The Lottery of Babylon. And I'll provide a link for that. It's only 4 or 5 pages long, and it really gives you a sense of how important chance is into this formulation. Because he'll say that chance basically changes everything when it happens. It occurs that all the dice throws in a process are part, the set of these dice throws are part of what he calls the aleatory point, which is where aleatory means kind of random, or it also relates with uncertainty, uncertain. And then when that happens, it changes, it affects all the series. It kind of changes everything. And that's sort of how the rules get changed every single time it goes through one of these aleatory points, where chance is affirmed and ramified. And the second literary figure, he only uses literary figures in this chapter to back him up, is Stéphen Mallarmé, who was a 19th century symbolist poet. He was influenced by Charles Baudelaire, and in his own right, he influenced several revolutionary schools of art, including Cubism, Futurism, Dadaism, and Surrealism. And Deleuze will point to Mallarmé's masterpiece, Le Livre, or in English it's called The Book, which was something he spent 30 years working on and never completed. This is from the Amazon description. The Book, by Mallarmé, is a visual poem about its own construction, the scaffolding of a cosmic architecture intended to reveal all existing relations about everything. On the esoteric sides of things, he uses death as an example of the event, of the pure event. He'll give an example like that. And he'll end the chapter with a quote from Mallarmé, the book, which talks about the death of an old man, the death of speech, and then the birth of a newborn infant who is born and will be able to speak. So it's kind of ends on the death rebirth archetype. And that's all I got for now with this. Hope you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you do. We'll see you next time for Series 11 on nonsense. Take care.